Hi class, I'm introducing Module 9 about Howlation and Vanishing Boundaries. This exercise is pretty difficult and we're going to rely on a lot of the knowledge that we've already gained throughout the semester. I mean, up until this point, you've learned to manipulate visual perception by understanding simultaneous contrast, understanding that the ground can actually subtract itself from the figure, and you've created compositions that create the illusion of transparency, and also you've started to understand how proportion can create a harmonious color composition even with really disparate colors. So for this next assignment, we're going to be creating a composition that utilizes the phenomena of halation and also creates a composition in which the boundaries of your cut pieces of paper start to disappear. So how can those two things occur? They can occur by creating a composition which relies on hues that are close together on the color wheel, very similar, and also very similar in terms of value. So first I'm going to read you a passage through Joseph Albers, from Joseph Albers' Interaction of Color, which I think is really important to kind of understand how he thinks about equal light intensity and vanishing boundaries. Though rarely perceived, it is a fact that articulation boundaries between colors can be made nearly unrecognizable or made practically invisible through the choice of color alone. This is very surprising and most exciting of all the color phenomena, and it depends, like other effects, on specific conditions. In other words, it depends on your careful choice of hues. Now, many color painters and designers are very aware of this theory, and you can see some of the work illustrated in the examples in the My Courses page, but also if you think about it, the Impressionist painters were the first to start playing around with this idea of both vanishing boundaries and also halation. So I'm going to show you a quick example of just halation as a visual phenomena, and with these two colors right here. So I have this sort of teal, deep teal blue, and this kind of red violet. Actually, this is how this works. And so these two colors right here are actually fairly close together in terms of their value. And I know this because I went ahead and used that tip that I've showed you in your assignment page, which you just place one corner of the one color on top of another and stare at it for about 30 seconds, really fatigue your eyes, and then quickly remove it. And if you can see an after image there, that's okay if it occurs the other way. So if you do it on this side and the same thing happens, you're fine. Those are usually similar values. So if you see after images on both, that means they're similar. If you don't see after images on both, that means it's similar. If you see one after image when it's removed, that means the one on top is darker. So that's how you sort of read that. So what I first did is I took these two parent colors, this is how I'll refer to them always, and I tried to come up with their offspring or their child. And this is exactly the same as you worked with in transparencies. And I came up with a sort of darker violet. And so when you put it over in sort of a small amount, it appears that these two colors do share characteristics. But as I pull this red violet away, something really interesting occurs. You can see the effect, the phenomena of halation. If you look at this edge right here, you can see it appears much more scarlet. If you look at the edge close to the red violet, it appears to be darker. That's because this red is, of course, subtracting the red out of this middle color and just leaving behind the blue. And the same thing is happening on this side. The blue is subtracting itself from this darker violet and leaving behind the red. It's really kind of interesting because it appears to actually be dimensional. This feels like it's shaded. This feels like it's a little higher and actually has this idea of it going up. So that's one example. I also prepared another example where I took hues that were relatively similar, maybe yellow and green, but had a little bit different values. And what I did is I just went with this pretty bright orange and this kind of olive green, and I was trying to find their child or offspring. So I started with this, and you can see where this thin strip, the idea of halation is kind of there, but as I pull it away, you can see that visual perception sort of occur. And I think this is like super fascinating and really interesting in terms of the way you can manipulate color itself. So with that in mind, this is my middle color, and I decided to pick some other hues that would have some similarities with this or some relationship between these two colors. So I did that and then just cut a number of strips of paper. These are basically 1 inch wide and a little bit longer, and I'll just throw them out here. And then also, what I want you to do is start thinking about sorting, and we're actually sorting these into families. And so as I start to sort and put these together, even though the paper's curled just a bit, you can start to see that phenomena of halation just basically occurring with this spectrum. It's really kind of interesting. So that's basically the sort of strategy. And you can see right here with this piece, I've already mounted it on a piece of paper. Now for you guys, this assignment has 2 parts. One part is to create a halation strip and put that in your sketchbook, and also use that as a point of discussion on the discussion board. And from this strip, it's gonna choose your color combination or your color sort of strategy for your next part of the assignment, which is the more complex color composition. So you can see a couple of things happening here. Obviously you can see the halation is pretty visible, but there's 2 things that are occurring. You not only do you have to create incidents of halation in your composition, that's one of the criteria. The other thing is you have to think about vanishing boundaries, because what I don't want you to do when you're cutting out pieces of paper, which in a sense are shapes, just like this is a pretty distinctive shape, when you place that on a white ground, obviously the shape is what you see more than the color. What I want you to focus on your composition is not the edges of the shapes, but the colors themselves. In fact, I want the boundaries to almost disappear. If you look in this little strip, in the area where the values of the hues start to approach sort of almost, they're even, especially right here, you can see that this those edges are a little bit blurry. If you go back to this orange, which is much higher value than this sort of shade of this orange, you can see that the boundary is actually incredibly distinct. In that case, if this color was next to that, this edge would be very distinct. You know, it would change a little bit in these other areas. Like these 2 areas, like this edge right here, almost disappears. And that way you would be actually more aware of the color than actually the shapes that you're using. So in the assignment itself, I want you to choose the 6 hues and create that strip. So that's the first part. And then this will be the basis for the discussion board. And then the final assignment to be submitted into the Dropbox is kind of almost a free color assignment. I have basically a couple of criteria. The main criteria to incorporate halation and vanishing boundaries in your design. So that's in a nutshell that. The other thing is I've got a pretty specific scale. It can either be 7 by 10 or 6 by 7. You're gonna use the color aid paper and cut it out. Your craftsmanship on this project is actually extremely important. Then the subject matter can range from a simple shape of one color on a ground of equal value and closest in hues to many colors and a variety of shapes. But the primary element you're concerned with is color, not shape. This is not a shape exercise. We're not focusing on the element of shape, but we're focusing on the element of color. Now, in your composition itself, it can be pretty simple. I've got some examples on your assignment sheet to look at. That being said, the principles of design are not thrown out the window. You're still gonna have to think about balance. You're still gonna have to think about, in some cases, not so much contrast, but that has to be there if you wanna have emphasis on certain areas. And it is possible to have areas of contrast in this particular design to create areas of emphasis, just like you did with your black, white, gray, and texture design. So think about all of those things. You have 2 weeks to work on this. I want you to take your time. Use a very sharp blade in your X-Acto knife. Do not be afraid to get rid of your blades. I think it makes a lot of difference. And just think about this like kind of really crazy phenomena of halation. I mean, I just think this is incredible, really. I mean, the first time I saw this, I was like wowed by it, because as you see it pull apart, you can actually really see that difference between this side and that side. So good luck. I can't wait to see what you're coming up with. You guys have been doing a great job all semester. It's been really exciting for me to see what you're doing. And I'm just gonna leave you with one example from this Joseph Albers book of Vanishing Boundary. And I just want you to see, so you can see these two hues on this side, which are separated by white, and they have very distinct shapes. And on this side, because they're very close together in value, their boundaries essentially disappear. So those are the kind of phenomena that I want you to actually sort of think about. And I think it's got a couple of examples here. Here's this sort of lavender and gray. And you can see, because they're so close in value, they essentially, this gray and lavender sort of meld together. Good luck with this. These are great examples of simple geometric designs that you can use for your composition, which are completely acceptable. So I'll see you next time. Take care.